I'm co-director of an organization called Culture Push, which I formed with Arturo Vidic and Aki Sasamoto. We started in 2007. And for me, that brings together a lot of the principles, which my other titles, which are like performance maker and director and improviser and writer, that kind of contains all of that within Culture Push co-director. Destabilizing the relationship between art making and art consuming, I do that kind of willy-nilly because I never stick with one thing long enough to be categorized and solidified and therefore in some way funded. I embody the principles more fully than maybe I should because I end up with a kind of skating over the surface of a certain reality, monetary reality, because I'm not paying attention enough to the fact that everything is still tied to money. I think I started to think about sustainability as a spiritual whole, in a way, that is something that affects every part of your life. In about 99, I'd say, because I was being burned out completely. I felt like the model was not sustainable. I could not continue the way I was doing, and I needed to find new ways of thinking about how to make and how to do. It's always been part of my consciousness that things are difficult for the planet through the burden of human existence, especially since the Industrial Revolution and our capability of kind of voraciously consuming all natural resources anywhere, you know, and subsuming the entire physical reality to our perceived needs. That's always been something I wanted to address, and then it was becoming more like culturally relevant. It wasn't quite in the, now it's just a given, and it's amazing what's shifted in 10 years. In 2001, when I watched the towers come down, you know, on my roof, something went click, and I think something went click all over. That sense of vulnerability, and everybody reacted very differently. Mostly, unfortunately, politically in ways that have irrevocably changed for the worse. But also, it brought to people in New York City like a certain sense of vulnerability and sorrow and quietness, which is like, usually we're afraid to look at in this particular environment, but for me, I saw that happen, and it was like watching the decay, the inevitable decay of, you know, physical objects, but in really fast motion. So I was in the middle of doing a production at that time, and then as I went on, I came up with this idea that we have to address the visceral part of why we are a producing and consuming society. To me, that was based in the fear of death and decay, basically, and the way that it's death and decay are not in some way integrated into our consciousness as a culture, and are in fact a source of deep fear and anguish. I knew that if I did continue making work, it would have to be in a very different way. It would have to not rely on money as much. It would have to rely on exchange of resources, creating networks. And with Salvage Salvation, it was very direct. Use only what's been thrown away. And then that became even more narrow. Use only what's on site. It was also the beginning of understanding myself as an artist. Floundering because I was finally acknowledging that I wasn't fitting into anything, and it's like, what I do, is it even art? How do I know if it's art? Is it creating? I don't know. Maybe I'm just a producer. Maybe I just, because what Salvage Salvation is gathering a group of people and saying, okay, here's the parameters, now create. And negotiate, and I was directing a bit, you know, but I found that was, for me, the most sustainable way of engaging a group of people and that is also how I started working with Arturo and Aki and found that kind of kindred something. But it is also the beginning of what I call making conceptual performance art. I realized later was stupid because all art is conceptual, but it was what I meant by that was that things are driven by a concept that has several iterations. Trist was another concept, you know, and that again, it was like I was the motivating force, but then it becomes egalitarian. So I feel like I'm always erasing myself as an author in some way, and that's interesting because that's very radical on some level. It's like I create spaces where these new things can happen, and I do feel like Trist was a new thing. And part of me, yes, wants to be known, but part of me wants just to have the ideas present, and that is not currency. That is not a thing. That is not even an experience. You can, you know, that brings me to the art making as life living. I think it's become clear to us that our identity lies in our participation, in participation. That is the key, is that what we present or what we decide to kind of support or create is always bears this element of participation from whoever is involved. And the other element of that is cross-discipline, where creative thinking is not bound by the ideas of these delineations. The virtuosity lies in creating the situation, you know, in creating an event that draws people in enough who are not of it, for example, to want to participate. And that is an art. And for a long time I was saying my art form is social interaction. And I think that may be the most accurate. Our currency is ideas and transformation, using our social capital in a way to create concrete events. And I miss sometimes this sense of making a thing and giving it and selling it, or, you know, like just the simple transaction nature of that, even if the thing is a dance. Cyborg Nation, it's a culturalist project. It's entirely about participation. It's entirely about how we live now in our bodies with our machines, you know, and how we think and what our philosophies are of existence. I want to hear what people's existential dilemmas, and during Salvage Salvation that happened a lot, that somehow this talk about what makes garbage garbage led people to discuss their health, you know, their relationships to money and things. I want people to look at the choices they're making, think about what choice making means, think about what existence means. I mean, it's a ridiculous thing to want, you know, but it's because I have this desire to save the world, and I can't seem to escape from art making. I'm going again to the heart of the matter. What can art do? It can shift consciousness. That is so ephemeral. That's more ephemeral than movement, you know. Shift consciousness. What the hell does that mean? That's not something you can market. Is that people need to live, and the way that you live is money, and that's. But then, is it? And that's the question. Like, and that's a question that's actually again addressed directly within art, craft, tech, between the health and the wealth, and like, well, what do you need to live, and what do you need to stay healthy, and what actually does sustain you? One of the people in art, craft, tech, his name is Abe Bjerkson, and he wrote this problem statement on money and divided the economy into what we call the money economy and the mortality economy. That we're trying to pay for the things that are in the mortality economy with money. The paradox is you're trying to create something that's actually sustainable, but in fact perhaps unsustainable within the current system. But the system is so unsustainable. So then you're trying to create something that's actually sustainable within an unsustainable system, so paradoxically it's unsustainable. And it's completely exhausting. Sustainability, if not success. I just want to stay alive.